Welcome to Concept 3 Notes. We're going to be talking more about the periodic table, which was definitely introduced in Concept 2, but now we're going to look a little bit deeper into this. So the periodic table is a table that organizes all of the elements known to exist by their atomic numbers. And in doing that, we also see that they're organized by their chemical properties. So there are some really cool patterns and trends in the periodic table. I'm going to teach you about just a few of them today, but essentially they're arranged by atomic number. And in doing that, there ends up being some other cool things too. Now, we talked about in Concept 2, all periodic tables have elements arranged in the same order based on their atomic numbers and the trends, but different periodic tables do include other different featured information. You know, like some will have the states of matter. Some will have the arrangement of the electrons and their energy levels and the electron clouds. Others will have their classification if they're metals, nonmetals, metalloids. Some have their state of matter at like room temperature of solid, liquid, gas. So there's all sorts of different things like that, but they all have their atomic number, name, symbol, and atomic mass or average atomic mass. So we're going to kind of dive into more of what this arrangement is, because you might be looking at this and saying like, why is it this weird shape? Like, why is there this space right here? Why do we hop from here to all the way over here? And there is a reason, because again, they're not solely arranged by atomic number. They're also arranged by some properties. So we're going to walk through those things now. First, let's talk about what groups are. Groups are the vertical columns, the up and down on the periodic table. All elements in the same group have the same number of valence electrons. Remember, valence electrons are the electrons in an atom's outermost energy level of its electron cloud. They have the most energy because they're furthest from the nucleus. And they really determine the bonding behavior that we're going to see in these atoms. Groups are also known as families. So sometimes you'll see a group referred to as a family. That's a synonym for group. Group 1, every element that's in group 1 has one valence electron. So one electron in its outermost energy level. Group 2 has 2. We're going to skip the transition metals. I'll show you that in a second, which is groups 3 through 12. And then when you get to group 13, it has 3. Group 14 has 4, 15 has 5, 16 has 6, 17 has 7, and then group 18 has 8, with the exception of helium. But these are the general trends. So because of this, because of where the groups that they're in, that's going to determine their bonding behavior, which gives them some similar chemical properties if they're in the same group. Okay, so here's an example of a periodic table. And we're going to talk about, I'm going to rehash that what I just talked about now that you can actually see it. So everything in this first group, see the number 1 up here? All of these things have one valence electron, which means if they lose that one valence electron, then they now have their next energy level. The one that's on the next level in is full, and that's going to be more stable. So we're going to learn in our next unit how these atoms in this group, they like to lose that valence electron when they bond to things. This group has 2 valence electrons. Again, we're going to skip this section right here. It's called the transition metals. We're going to skip them. That brings us to group 13 has 3, 14, 4, 15, 5, 16, 6, 17, 7, and then group 18 has 8 with the exception of helium. If you remember helium, or you can see here, helium has an atomic number of 2, so it has 2 protons. That means if it's electrically neutral, it only has 2 electrons total. The first energy level of the electron cloud holds 2 electrons. So all of these other ones have multiple energy levels, and that outermost level has 8, but helium has 2. So it's all the way in here instead of over here because it has a full outer energy level. That's why it gets categorized with these. And that means it's already stable as it is, and it's not going to want to bond. So again, this is all stuff that I'm just barely introducing you to because we're going to talk about it a lot more in our next unit. Okay, group names or family names to know. Group 1 are your alkali metals. These are your most reactive metals. This is everybody except for hydrogen because hydrogen's not a metal. For metals, reactivity, we'll look at this in a second. I'll show you a diagram of this, but reactivity increases as you move down a group. So the further down you go, the more reactive it actually is. Group 2 are known as the alkaline earth metals. Group 3 are the rare earth metals. Groups 3 through 12 are the transition metals. I've already mentioned that. 17 are the halogens. These are your most reactive nonmetals. For nonmetals, reactivity decreases as you move down the group. And then group 18 are your noble gases. These are non-reactive elements due to them already being chemically stable because they have full energy levels of electrons. Like I said, helium's only got that one energy level with a 2 that fills it. Every level after that, you're going to see the outermost level has 8. And so it's going to be full and stable, which makes it non-reactive because there's no benefit for those elements reacting with other elements because they're already stable as is. And typically they're only reacting to gain stability. Okay, so again, this is, if we're going to look back at our periodic table, this is the alkali metal group. Notice I cross out hydrogen though. So just lithium to francium are alkali metals. These are all alkaline earth metals. This group right here are your rare earth metals. This whole section is transition metals. Then you could technically, some people call this the boron group, the carbon group, the nitrogen group, the oxygen group, but those are kind of like not special names. Whereas this group 17 is fluorine, that's your halogens. And then the last group, like I said, is noble gases. Now, a periodic trend I mentioned is reactivity. Periodic trends are specific patterns in the periodic table that make it possible to make predictions about an element's properties. So there are a lot of these. There's ionization energy, electronegativity, atomic radius, electron affinity, like all these other things that we will learn about in Chemistry 1. But for our purposes, I'm going to introduce you to one of these. That's it. Only one periodic trend. And that's the one I already mentioned, which is reactivity. So this is just a measure of how readily an atom will react. Atoms tend to react in ways that get them to have the configuration of the nearest noble gas to them because that's going to be the most stable version. Okay, remember noble gases are stable and non-reactive. So metals increase in reactivity as you move down and left on the periodic table. So over this way. Non-metals increase in reactivity as you move up and right. So these are the most reactive non-metals over here, with the exception of course, our noble gases. So really up here in those halogens. Okay, that's just one periodic trend. Now back to like some other things I want to show you on the periodic table. Periods. So I told you groups are vertical columns. Periods are the horizontal rows on the periodic table. So they're going this way. All elements in the same period have the same number of energy levels in their electron cloud. Okay, that's really important. So remember, all atoms have a nucleus with protons and neutrons, and that nucleus is surrounded by an electron cloud with electrons. That cloud is subdivided into shells or energy levels. They each hold a certain number of electrons. So level 1, which is closest to the nucleus, they have the least amount of energy. Those hold a maximum of 2 electrons. Level 2 holds up to 8 electrons. Level 3 holds up to 8 for our purposes. Level 4 holds up to 18 for our purposes. It actually starts to get more complicated, but that's again not something we're getting into in this course. That would be like a Chemistry 1 thing we'll address. But so for your purposes, just think 2, 8, 8. And then honestly, even 8. You don't need to worry about the 18, but we're never going to get up that high in terms of what we're looking at. So that shouldn't need to stress you out. But we're always filling the innermost level first. You hopefully saw that in our build an atom PhET simulation, where if you tried to add electrons further out, they just automatically filled the innermost energy level first, that level 1, before they filled in level 2, level 3. So everything in this period, so this is row number 1, period number 1, aka hydrogen and helium, they only have one energy level. Row 2 or period 2 has 2 energy levels. Period 3 has 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so simple enough. Period tells you energy levels. Groups tell you number of valence electrons. Okay, so atomic structure in the periodic table. An element's location on the periodic table informs us about its atomic structure. So we've seen this in concepts 1 and 2. We have seen this at work. Like we can look things up on the periodic table and figure out things about the element. We can figure out how many protons it has, neutrons, electrons, if it's electrically neutral, that kind of thing. But we can also now figure out even more now that we know about these patterns and groups and periods. So for example, magnesium. Okay, what do we know about magnesium by looking at it on the periodic table? Okay, well, we know that its nucleus has 12 protons because it has an atomic number of 12. We know that the average atomic mass leads us to believe that the mass number most likely of the most common isotope of magnesium has another 12 neutrons because the average atomic mass on the periodic table is 24. So we can assume then maybe 12 neutrons in the nucleus. We see that's in period 3 on the periodic table, which if it's in period 3, that means its electron cloud has 3 energy levels. Okay, So that's adding to my understanding now of this atom. I see it's in group 2, so that tells me it has 2 valence electrons. So assuming it's electrically neutral, it would have 12 total electrons to balance out the 12 protons in the nucleus, and 2 would be valence electrons. So first, we always fill from the inside out. The first energy level holds 2. The next energy level holds another 8. So we're at 10 total so far, and then that leaves 11 and 12 to go in the outermost energy level, which it has 2 there, which makes sense because it's in group 2, so it should have 2 valence electrons. Okay, these are the types of things we're figuring out from the periodic table. And they allow us to do something called draw Bohr models, which we'll get to in a minute. But I have one other thing I want to teach you about the periodic table first, and that's the classification of elements. So all elements on the periodic table can be classified as metals, nonmetals, or metalloids. Metals are elements that have several properties to them. They're shiny, silvery solids, typically. They are good conductors of heat and electricity. They tend to be malleable and ductile. And then you can find them on basically the left side of the periodic table. So I've kind of color coded all the metals in this seafoam green color, okay? All of these ones that are white, we're just not entirely sure about, okay? Nonmetals are on the right side of the periodic table with the exception of hydrogen. They tend to be gases or dull, brittle solids. They are poor conductors. They're to the right of the metalloids, okay, on this side, like I said, again, with the exception of hydrogen. Now, metalloids, what are those? That's what I've kind of highlighted in yellow, okay? These tend to be solids, and then they have properties of both metals and nonmetals. So they're not great or bad conductors. They're considered semiconductors. They tend to have physical properties like metals, but chemical properties like nonmetals. Now, there is some debate about polonium and astatine. Some references say that polonium is a metal due to its conductivity. That's why I made it green. Others say it's a metalloid. Some references say that astatine is a metalloid. Some others say it's a nonmetal. I'm just letting you know, at some point I just kind of had to say, okay, I'm going to stick with this source and this is how I'm going to classify this. But I just want you to know you don't need to stress because I'm not going to try to trick you on the test and be like, is polonium a metal or a metalloid? You tell me. But I may say, is chromium? And you should be able to say, oh, it's over here on the periodic table. Yeah, it's probably a metal. Or sulfur, it's over here. Yeah, that's going to be a nonmetal. Okay, but we are going to be kind of getting familiar with this arrangement. So in class right now, we're going to do a little pause and we're going to make sure that we're coloring and labeling a periodic table so you can keep track of all of these trends we learned about. But I have one more thing I said I wanted to show you how to do in these notes before I let you go, and that's Bohr model drawings. So a Bohr model is just a simple diagram that shows the atomic structure of an atom. And if you remember when we learned about atomic theory in those discovery stations at the start of this unit, the Bohr model was not disproven, but we basically added on to our understanding of the atomic structure thanks to Schrodinger and Heisenberg and James Chadwick. And so now we know that, James Chadwick told us about the neutrons, but Schrodinger and Heisenberg let us know that electrons are not this stagnant. And it's basically impossible to predict where electrons are at any given moment other than within the energy level they should be in. However, that's impossible to draw because they're constantly moving and we can't predict their location. How are we supposed to then depict an atom? And so that's where Bohr models are really useful. We use them because they allow us to visualize an atom structure even though they don't necessarily accurately depict how electrons are acting or behaving. Okay, but they are still useful because they help us depict structure. So we will be practicing drawing them because, again, they help you understand the atom structure. So how do we draw them? First, you need to determine the number of protons, and you do that by looking at the element's atomic number. And that's going to go in your nucleus. Then you have to determine the number of neutrons by subtracting. So we're going to take the mass number minus the atomic number. That tells us how many neutrons there are, and so we can put both of those in the nucleus for our drawing. From there, you're going to look up the element's period number based on where it is on the periodic table, and that's going to tell you how many energy levels are in its electron clouds. That's how many circles you're going to draw around your nucleus. So you'll draw those. Then you're going to fill in electrons on each level, and you always work from the inside out. Okay, so we'll put 2 on the first level, then 8, etc. We're going to assume the atom is electrically neutral, meaning that it has the same number of total electrons as total protons, unless given information otherwise, unless we're told it's an ion, okay? Then when you finish, to see if you did it right, because number 5 is the hardest part, to see if you did it right, You'll then count your number of valence electrons and that outermost energy level, and you'll double check to make sure it's the same as the group number that the element's in on the periodic table. And then if it is, you'll know that you probably did it right. Okay, let's do an example before we do a lot of this in class. Draw the Bohr model for boron. Okay, so first, we have our nucleus. We have to determine how many protons are in it. That's going to be based on the element's atomic number on the periodic table. Boron is number 5, so it has 5 protons in its nucleus. Next, we need to determine the number of neutrons based on its mass number. So in this prompt, we didn't get the mass number. So I'm just going to use the average atomic mass on the periodic table. It's 10.81, which rounds to 11 as the closest whole number. So I'm going to assume that the most common isotope of boron is boron 11. 11 minus 5 protons gives me 6 neutrons for the nucleus. Now from there, step number 4, I need to use the period number on the periodic table to determine how many energy levels are in the electron cloud. Okay, so when I look, I can see it's in period 2, so it's going to have 2 energy levels. Next, step number 5, I'm going to put electrons on each level starting from the inside out. So I'm assuming electric neutrality because it doesn't tell me otherwise. So if there's 5 protons, that means there's 5 total electrons. The innermost energy level only holds 2, so 2 are going to go there, and that leaves me 1, 2, 3 more for that outermost energy level. So again, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 total electrons for 5 total protons, which would make this whole thing electrically neutral. I double check my work by saying I have 3 valence electrons. Boron is in group 13. All elements in group 13 have 3 valence electrons, so that helps me know that I did this right. We are going to do a little project where you're going to draw Bohr models for the first 20 elements on the periodic table, which are easy ones, so they're not too tricky. And doing that kind of practice is going to really help to set this in stone in your brain and help you really remember those patterns and trends from the periodic table. So I hope this helps.